We are recording the interview of James Wandell. The interview is being conducted by Katie Bradshaw from the Wright State University Veteran Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at the Holiday Inn in Dayton, Ohio. It is 3:33 p.m. on October 19th, 2019. And I believe you want to go by Jim, correct?
That's the one I use.
Well, welcome, Jim. Thank you for coming today.
Okay, my pleasure.
Let's begin with having you tell me a little about when and where you were born.
I was born in Philadelphia, specifically South Philadelphia, in 1944 at Presbyterian Hospital, and began life on Ogden Street, which I believe is now a parking lot. From there, the family moved to Darby, Pennsylvania, on the Darby Creek, which is another suburb of Philadelphia, and lived there for a good number of years until the 8th grade, and then was off to Havertown, Pennsylvania, to live in the grandparents' house. The whole family moved to the grandparents' house to take care of the grandmother and the grandfather in Brookline, Pennsylvania, Havertown, Pennsylvania Township. After that, I just went to school at Haverford and started working in a luncheonette, making hoagies. Pennsylvania people know about hoagies. And cooking cheesesteaks and doing all that kind of stuff until I graduated high school. And went immediately into the service, the Army. The funny part is that I had been planning all through the latter years of high school to be a machine operator, a heavy machine operator, bulldozers, that sort of thing, and even had arrangements with a friend of mine's father who owned a construction company to go in, get my training as a combat engineer, and come out, and he'd give me a job. And I wouldn't have to be an oiler and start at the bottom. I'd start out as a journeyman. Sounded like a great deal. So off I went to Upper Darby, Pennsylvania, to the recruiter's office and filled out all the papers. And next thing I knew, I was down at 401 North Broad Street, Philadelphia, which was the induction center. Well, there was this massive room full of benches and people sitting there, and we all got herded through all the medical stuff and so forth, and taking tests. And then we were all eventually, after lunch, sitting back, probably about 50 or 60 people, guys, sitting in this big open area. And they kept coming in and calling names, and people would go away and wouldn't see them again. And this went on until I was the only one left in this big room. And the lights were going out all over, and like, have I been forgotten about? Well, this rather shabby-looking captain, in definite need of a shave, came out, and he called my name. I said, yeah, it must be me. I'm the only one here. He said, come on back here. So we went weaving through an acre of cubicles to the farthest back corner. And he said, I'm with the Army Security Agency, and your test scores say you could be one of us. I said, what are we talking about? Come on, I'm 18 years old here. He said, well, it's kind of like an army within the Army, and we're very different. We do intelligence kinds of things. So we talked for a while, and he showed me a bunch of job possibilities, MOSs. I said, well, I like this one. That sounds good. That was microwave repair. That was an up-and-coming thing in 1962. Okay, that sounds good. 19-week school. That sounds pretty good. Okay, I'll do that. Off I went to basic training in Fort Dix, New Jersey. Horrible way to spend 8 weeks, I'll tell you right now. And went off to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, Red Bank, New Jersey.
Real quickly, what was horrible about it?
Oh, come on. Fort Dix, New Jersey in October and November is not the most pleasant place in the world. It's cold, it's wet, it's miserable, and the things they had us doing just were not fun. I mean, the rifle thing was fun, and some of the other things were fun, but a lot of it that just wasn't fun. But it was a good experience, though.
Were they things that you expected ahead of time, or was it a surprise when you were there?
It was kind of a surprise. Yeah, kind of a surprise. No one really prepared us at those. They do now, but they didn't then.
Yeah.
It was just basic training, 8 weeks, and you're going to do it. Or you're going to do it over again and over again until one of us gets tired of each other and we're going to go away. So that was the game and the game. So anyway, I finished basic training, got out of it finally, and off to Fort Monmouth I went. What a totally different operation there. Concrete buildings, nice people, and a school. Nice. Not a lot of extra duties or anything. You're there to learn. And so I went over for the interview get set up in class. And I said, microwave repair. And he said, yeah, well, we don't do that here anymore. I said, well, why am I here? That's what's on my contract, my DD4. He said, well, we just don't do that here anymore. Now, here's some other options for you. And I looked and I said, oh, hey, that looks kind of interesting. General cryptographic repair. What's interesting about it? Well, it's 36 weeks long. That's better than 19 weeks. And I do have a girlfriend in Philadelphia. It's going to work. So there we are. So I went into general crypto, and that's where I first got my first clearances. Which, go ahead.
Would you like to explain what that job is?
Well, at that time, there were two kinds of cryptographic equipment. That's the equipment used to encode our communications, to secure them. One is general crypto, which is what I went into, which was small, portable, tactical, sometimes, machines. Fixed crypto was just that. It was big, cumbersome equipments that were used in fixed locations to create the backbone network of communications and keep them secure. So, it's just two different forms of the same thing.
Okay, 36 weeks, that's a pretty long technical school.
That's a very long technical
So that must have been a very challenging program.
Well, yeah. You start out for 10 weeks, you're doing nothing but teletype equipment, which is another whole MOS at the time. But you still had to know how to do it because typically the teletype repairmen weren't allowed in the secure areas. So we had to be able to do both as crypto repairmen. And then there was the cryptographic equipment, and there was quite a bit of that, different types for different applications. So 36 weeks later, I graduated. Well, because I was ASA, and I should mention that Fort Monmouth is a Signal Corps location. Signal Corps hates ASA, incidentally. They always have. They think we're the cops. So, thought we were the cops, more correctly. Anyway, ASA had an interesting situation. If you were among the high 3 in the class, you actually got to choose your assignment. Hey, how great. Nobody gets to do that. I mean, Signal Corps guys, just tell them where to go. So I was second in the class, and they said, where do you want to go? Well, I had met this fellow. He was a Spec 4, which was a lot because I was a PFC. I wasn't even a PFC then, but I was a private then. But he told me all about Korea. I said, that sounds like where I want to go. So my choices were Korea, Korea, and Korea. Because he had 3 choices. So I put down, and guess what? I got Korea. So.
What did your family think about you moving to Korea?
I don't think they missed me terribly. We had one of those different kind of relationships. I worked all the time. I more or less boarded at my family's home.
Okay, and did they know you were adventurous? And
oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
they expected.
Yeah, they expected. They knew I wasn't going to stay. I was not going to be live in Havertown the rest of your life person. That wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
So anyway, I packed off, and before I was to leave Fort Monmouth, they gave me the advance money to travel and orders and so forth to go to Oakland, California, and get on a troop ship. a very uncomfortable way to move anywhere. I said, okay, well, that's the price you pay, no biggie. So I was on leave for pre-PCS leave, and telephone rang. It was the ATCO, the Army Transportation, whatever ever, the folks that schedule things, and said, hey, we've got an extra Cat Z. I had no idea what that meant. An extra Cat Z flight. I knew what that meant. Going to Korea. Do you want it? Well, don't throw me in the briar patch. So I said, yeah, sure. I'll drive up. So I drove up to Fort Monmouth from Philly. And I found out there a Cat Z flight is a standard commercial flight, a ticket that the government has purchased at a special rate, but it was a standard commercial flight. Well, this is not a bad deal. The only difference was you had to be in uniform. We had to be in uniform anyway, so it didn't matter. So here am I. I'm thinking of PFC by then, E3. And I get on board, and there was another Spec 4, and he was returning to Korea for another tour up in the DMZ area. He was a combat arms of some sort. Anyway, we had a rather, and he was the old guy now. So we had a rather delightful flight out of Idlewild at that time, which is what Kennedy is now, by way of Chicago, by way of Anchorage, on a Boeing 707, where Heg Pinch was 50 cents a drink, all the way to Japan, to Tokyo, because the curfew prohibited the landing in Korea until the next day. So they had to put us up in the hotel. It was the Hotel Diamond in Tokyo, and they gave us meal tickets. Fine. Which we happened to exchange at the bar for beer. There's a pattern going on here. So anyway, we get to the next morning, we bus back across Tokyo, get to Narita. It was still not Narita, it was Haneda Airport, still commercial airport, and flew to Kimpo Airport in Seoul, which at that time, incidentally, was a giant Quonset hut. I mean, a big Quonset hut. Landed, we got out, and there was all the so appropriate hollering and screaming to anybody coming in, because there were a couple of troop planes that came in at the same time. Get on this bus, do this, do that. Well, I had an ASA patch on my shoulder, and I was assigned to the 508th ASA group in Seoul. And so I'm not quite sure what to do, kind of thing. And this sergeant saw my patch and said, hey, you going to 508th? I said, yes. He said, good. Come on, get in a Jeep. We're going. Good. I don't have to do the Army thing now, because some guys weren't that lucky. They got bused up to Camp Casey, to what everybody called the Turtle Farm, which was an in-processing, out-processing area of a bunch of buildings. And you went in one end, and 13 months later, you got to come out the other end of the building. So it was called the Turtle Farm, because it took 13 months to rest. But of course, you came in, processed, went to a unit, came back, and went out. But we didn't do that. I went straight to the group, and nobody yelled and nobody hollered or anything else. I think I'm liking this so far. Nice young fellow, probably a Spec 4 or something, in the orderly room, said, gee, we'll draw your sheets and so forth. There's a transient hooch down there. That's a Quonset hut. And there I was in Korea. Spent a miserable night because everybody else had mosquito nets and I didn't. I was also the only one in the transient hut. But that's all right. Kicked around the compound for a couple of days. Finally went to personnel, and they said, well, you're being assigned to the 226 ASA Operations Company on Kangwon-do Island. Okay. Whatever that means, I think I like it, because I like it so far. And they looked at my record and said, you drew travel pay. Well, okay, you get to keep that, and we won't pay you for a couple of months. Well, luckily I still had the money, because otherwise I would have been broke if I'd spent all that money. So anyway, they said, hang around. Their courier will be here sooner or later. And this 3/4 ton ammunition carrier, basically a pickup truck, M38A1, no, whatever the number was, I forget now. Anyway, the guy says, get in the back. Okay, in the back. Did off duffel bag, the whole thing. And for the next hour and a half, we went up these dirt roads, dusty dirt roads, blowing sand, dirt, and muck all over you. And we got to a ferry landing. Okay. He said, well, there's the island. Okay. And the Han estuary separated the island from the mainland, which was a fascinating piece of water, the Han River estuary. There's multiple currents. It's almost impossible to swim, very swift. And this creaky old drop of the front landing boat, LCU, comes chugging across, and he drives onto it, and we chugged on over to the other bank and on up the road for another about, probably 5 miles into a compound full of, guess what, Quonset huts. That's where you're going to live. But it still sounded okay, other than the fact being a very dirty person and having very dirty clothes at that point. Well, it was Friday night when I got there. And I was assigned a hooch to sleep in, which happened to be the maintenance hooch, the operations maintenance hooch. And he said, well, we're having a show tonight at the club. What? Oh, entertainment. Oh, okay. And you're in civilian clothes. He said, oh yeah, we wear civilian clothes up here. Nobody else can come up here, so 5 o'clock the sundown, the ferry is shut down. Nobody can get on the island, so let's get serious. Why play Army all the time? ASA is different. We don't do a lot of Army stuff. We do intelligence stuff. So he said, here, you can borrow this shirt. You got a pair of khaki pants? Yeah. Well, they kind of look nice. Okay, wear those. Put some shoes on. We're going to the club. And that was my introduction to the 226.
Where was there a club?
Oh, it was right there on the compound. It was another Quonset hut with a bar in it. Okay, and a dance floor and all the usual accoutrements. So that was my first night in Korea, in the 226. And, well, it was a fun way to start the day, or start a tour. And the next day being Saturday and the next day being Sunday, nobody was particularly interested in bothering me. Just settled in, make yourself comfortable.
Were you wondering, how can this be real? How can it really be this good?
Yeah, the whole time. I kept waiting for the shoe to drop and wake up. But no, it was going to be fine. And Monday morning, I had my clearances already because I'd been in crypto school. Some people arrived without their clearances and they just worked on the compound until they got their clearance. But I had my clearances. So the maintenance chief at the time, Tom Shelton by name, he said, come on, take you up, I'll show you the shop. And got up there and he said, okay, what's your MOS? And I told him it was 342, General Crypto. And he said, oh, well, it's a shame we don't use that here. I said, okay. Do you have the equipment? He says, yeah, but we don't use it. It's backup. We don't even open the boxes anymore. So, okay, so what am I going to do? He says, I guess I'll cross-train. So I started cross-training into other MOSs, receiver repair, various countermeasures equipment repair. Just learn how to do everything, climb, erect antennas, do anything that was maintenance oriented. And it was some time after that, and by that time I said I was a PFC, so, E3, going to be that way for a while. And Tom and a number of the other fellas shipped out. End of their tours, 13 months. And the commander, a really neat guy, dead now, unfortunately, Francis Toomey, was looking for a new maintenance chief. And I got tagged. I'm a PFC. I can't command anything. Oh, they could fix that, because that's how they fixed this problem in ASA. They made you an acting something. So I became an acting corporal. There are no corporals in ASA, but I was an acting corporal. That's how I could command people that were older than me at a higher pay grade and tell them what to do. Like I knew what I was doing. I was 19 years old.
Was that because they saw in you that you were learning very quickly and they thought, this guy...
I have no idea what their motivation was, but I thought it was a pretty good choice.
Yeah.
Because it made me learn things faster. You know, that's how you learn. You get pushed into things. And no, we were about an 8-man shop when I got there. By the high water mark, there was 19 guys in the shop. I had to split it into 2 shifts. There was not enough room to work, not enough benches to work, not enough tools, test equipment.
Do you know why there was such an influx of personnel?
Yeah, there was a kind of a surplus. Just like I got sent to Congo, it's a good place to put people.
Okay, what year was this?
That was 1963. September 63 is the day I arrived. I'm sorry, 23rd of September 63 is when I arrived. And so I was the acting corporal. All right. And pretty soon I made E4, Spec 4, so they made me an acting sergeant instead. Eventually I become a sergeant and get paid that way, but that doesn't happen for quite a while. And with the influx of people, I created something rather unique. 2 ships, Mads and Dwings. Mads, middays, and Dwings, day swings. 12 noon to 9 at night. 3 in the morning till 12 noon. And the guys that and we were a 24-hour operation, so the guys who came off at 9 o'clock had the call until midnight. And the guys who were going to get up at 3 o'clock, so if they got up at 1 o'clock because of something needed a bit, then you get up on, big deal, you put an extra hour in. But the real beauty of it was when you were on that get off at 12 noon job, there was just still enough time to get down the mountain, get your clothes, get a shower, get cleaned up, get to the nearest town, grab a Korean bus, and get to Seoul. And you weren't due back again until 12 noon on Monday. That's called a 3-day pass without being one. It was kind of unique. The guys liked it.
I bet they loved it.
But it gave us better coverage too, because nobody had to stay all weekend and be on call. That's just not fair. So I broke it up there.
Yeah, I imagine that built morale.
Yeah, it did. The guys would do anything. We took on all kinds of extra jobs because we were happy. Nobody bothered us. It was good. Life was good. So that was how it worked. And the 226, and I'm here at a reunion right now. So it's our 9th one. We're always very motivated. We had important work to do. We were watching North Korea, and leave it at that, but we were watching. So that went on. Came the end of my tour, and I put in for an extension. I'll stay, guys. You know, this is pretty good. I'm not going to beat this anyplace. I want to stay. When the Army said no. Okay. So I sold all my goodies, my furniture that I had in the hooch. Not much, but, I sold it. Got ready mentally to go. And then a message came in. Commander called me and he said, "Hey, you're staying. You just got approved." Okay, now let me go buy back all my stuff. But I'm okay, I'm happy. So I stayed another 6 months. Left in March of 1965. And it was good. I went to headquarters ASA in Arlington Hall Station, and it was not so good. I learned at that point I don't like to be at headquarters. There's all kinds of people who worry about other people's business and don't have any reason to do so. And that sets a pattern for everything that's coming next. So here I am in Arlington Hall, and I go in. I'm still wearing my hard stripes and my sergeant stripes. And I go in the orderly room to check in, and this PFC starts giving me a bunch of nonsense. And I said, you haven't looked, I'm a sergeant and you're a PFC. One of us is going to be winning here, and it ain't you. Well, unfortunately, this first sergeant, who I never quite get along with him, came out and he defended his little clerky. I guess he got back at me, because the next thing I got was a set of orders making me back to a Spec 5, a Specialist 5th. And I was now on straight mids in the comm center, working in MOS that I'd never worked.
How did they have the authority to demote you?
They owned me. They didn't demote me. They just shifted me from one E5 to another E5.
Okay. I'm not really familiar with the Army.
Okay.
I was Air Force, so sorry about that.
Okay. Yeah. Air Force is different. I won't go into that. Anyway, honest service rivalry. So anyway, there I am on straight mids, but it's not going to be for long because I'm getting out. And after this little entry in the hall, which reinforced my dislike of headquarters, they asked me if I wanted to re-enlist, and I laughed. But before I left, I put in applications for 3 places in the federal government. For ASA as a Department of the Army civilian, didn't really want that, but it wasn't bad. CIA and NSA, National Security Agency, Central Intelligence Agency. Well, CIA called. I went down and interviewed. I didn't like what they were offering, grade-wise, and all that. We can't tell you. That gets old. But NSA called, said, come on down for an interview, and hey, okay. I got a job in about 5 months, because we have to, of course, re-clear you totally. Well, that's okay. I can find things to do. So that was in September of 65. I'm out of the Army. In Philadelphia, living outside of Philadelphia on the main line with my then girlfriend, an old friend, and working in a garage gas station kind of situation, just picking up money. And an old friend, a man I'd known from my luncheonette days in high school, happened to bump into each other, and he said, "What are you doing? I haven't seen you. I've been in the Army. Blah blah blah. Hey, I got an electronics company. Come on down. Give you a job." Well, it's got to be better than what I'm doing. So I went down to his place, and I was pulling orders and delivering and doing things like that. And it was a real thing. He was willing to have me stay, but I was honest. I told him, look, I got an application. I've been accepted federal government. He gave me the details. I said, I don't think you can ever beat what I've got in front of me, because here you got to have somebody die before you move up. And he said, yeah, that's the way it is. And so, yeah, well, I'm a young guy. So in February of 1966, I went down to NSA and I became an NSA employee. And of course, I had to be finally cleared and so forth. So I wandered around in a kind of hold pattern for a couple of months. But during that hold pattern, an opportunity presented itself, because they were manning up a station in Europe. And it was the first all-civilian station. This could be interesting. We're talking ground floor here. And again, I don't like headquarters, so this could be a thing. So I said yes. And by September, I was in England with my now wife. And doing a different job than I'd ever done before. But I liked it, and she liked it, and we were having a pretty good time. Money wasn't bad, living was good. The hours were miserable because it was rotating shifts, but you get used to that. But I was no longer in maintenance, I was now an operational person. But that old mechanic stuff, that old electronic stuff played in great because it kind of made me a two-sword guy because I could do two things. So I eventually extended, or actually took a second tour. No, 3 years plus 2 years, it was an extension of 2 years. And 5 years later, in 1971, I left and I'd been promoted twice. I was making pretty good money. I was back in the States, back at headquarters. Oh, grumble. But because of my experiences, I really didn't have any specific tasks to do. I was kind of being used as a utility infielder. They needed somebody who understood this or somebody who that. Well, I knew these and that things. So they'd throw me into different situations. And that was really great. And I was moving along pretty well, enjoying work more or less as much as I could enjoy it at headquarters. And then an opportunity presented itself, as it always does. In 1977, a fellow came to me and said, "Hey, how'd you like to go to Japan?" I said, "Okay, I don't even care doing what. It's not here, right?" He said, "That's right." So I was hired, and I became a field officer in 1978 in outside of Tokyo, Japan. And I was a traveling guy. My job was to go to all the various locations in the Pacific Rim, all the various military, ASA, Naval Security Group. At that point, it was AFSS, Air Force Security Service, later ESC, and it's got 12 more names since then. Air Force never seems to leave the name alone. They just keep changing it. I guess to protect the innocent or something. Anyway, I would basically be on airplanes a lot of the times. I think it was 1980, I counted up, I did 100,000 air miles, and I was on TDY 81% of my time.
How was that for your wife then?
Not real happy. Not unhappy, but gave her a lot of time to do other stuff. I mean, she became a certified instructor of kimikomi doll making. She had been very large in Girl Scouts all her young life. She became the district, whatever they called them, the person that had had control over all the Girl Scout troops on foreign soil in the Far East. So she had a pretty good time of it, but I was never there. But that's okay. Her father had been a merchant captain, and she learned from her mothers that husbands can be a financial necessity who get underfoot after a few days. So I was allowed to pursue my happy. Until the other guy in the office that was my counterpart rotated out and was replaced by someone who didn't belong there. A person, gender irrelevant, a person who had stomach problems and didn't like to travel. Now, why would you send someone with stomach problems to the Far East, and why would you send somebody who doesn't like to travel? So all of a sudden, I was doing basically two people's TDY. So it was getting really miserable. And at the end of it, I've been promoted again. Couldn't complain there. But, well, this was just not where I wanted to stay. So I said no thank you to an extension. Hey, made me right with my wife. I had said 3 years, so I didn't extend. But she had said that thing when I suggested the Space A go travel or go shop in Korea. And She said she didn't want to go shopping in Korea. She wanted to live there. I said, okay, started working on that problem. And everybody in Korea, the incoming and outgoing station chiefs, and everybody in Japan, the incoming and outgoing station chiefs, all thought it'd be a really great idea if we went directly from Japan to Korea. And everything was moving nicely in that direction until some little bureaucrat in personnel back at Fort Meade at NSA headquarters decided he may be going native and forget who he works for. We need to come back to the States, to the headquarters for a while to be reacclimatized. Oh, this is the kind of thinking you get into in personnel bureaucrats. So we packed up and went 12,000 miles from Japan to Maryland, and 10 months later packed up and went 12,000 miles from there back to Seoul, which could have been done a lot easier.
And cheaper.
For the government, and a little less troublesome for us. But that's c'est la guerre.
So for you, this was your second time in Korea.
Oh yeah, this is my second.
Where did your wife's interest in Korea come from?
Everything that I'd ever said about it. And the food. I'd introduced her to Korean food. Well, actually, she introduced herself to Korean food, cookbooks and so forth, because I liked it. She learned how to make it. My wife cooks in 8 languages.
You're a lucky man.
We never eat in the same country 2 nights in a row. We never have.
Oh, that would be fun in your house.
It's fun. So anyway, we got to Korea, and the job here is not with Americans. I was integrated into the Korean headquarters. My office was in the Korean headquarters.
What was the reason?
We were an advisor. We were teachers. We were advisors. We were helpers. We were friends to allies, to good allies. And the other guy with me, my workmate, had also done much the same history as mine. We'd all been in the same places, different times. So we actually traveled all over Korea. We had what were very unique. We had what were called blanket orders. Every 90 days, we got a set of orders that said, you may go TDY anywhere, anytime, any place, by any means, for any length of time. And nobody has to say, Mother, may I? It's based on the mission needs. So Korean officers or heads of departments or look, I got a problem at place X or another problem over here at Y. Can you go? Yeah, we'll go. And we would go out. And everybody knew us. We were trusted. We were friends.
So you had an open-ended budget to travel.
Yeah. Well,
as the job needed.
Not open-ended, but nobody ever said put a limit on it.
Okay.
They gave us a couple $1,000s and a set of orders, and we'd come back after 90 days and fill out a travel voucher that was usually about 1.25 inches thick. And they would give us more money and start processing the travel orders. And the funny one there is the local Army, 8th Army finance office used to process our vouchers. They actually had to hire a Korean fellow because almost all of our receipts were in Korean and the Americans couldn't read them. They had no idea we just put papers in there. So, they'd just give us more money and we would go back out and play in the weeds and come back in.
When you would do those TDYs, were they globally or was it mostly in Korea?
Strictly in Korea.
Okay.
Strictly in Korea. A few exceptions, but that was like for conferences or something like that. No, but it was all in Korea. We'd just go out and we'd be gone for about a week, 10 days or whatever, and come back. And it really wasn't hard on the family because we're a telephone call away. At that time, Korea, the Korean government had instituted direct distance dialing. And there were phone booths all over the country, very special phone booths. You walk in, you throw in a coin, and you could call. It wasn't like the old days when it was a real challenge to try to talk to an operator and make a number and get a connection. It was arcane. This was brand new, thanks to Simon's Electric. They sold that contract, or got that contract, and they placed that all over the country. So it was not nearly as difficult. And in fact, if there was an emergency, Korea's not that big. You could be home in 5-6 hours at the most. And we had our own trucks, so no problem. So that was a fun thing to do. And at the end of 2 years, I said, another 2 years, thank you. And I said, another year after that, thank you. So we stayed there until 1987. And we came back to headquarters. By now, I had been promoted 2 more times. So I was quite a ways up. And I had 2 professionalizations, certifications that I was a senior person. One in intelligence collection and the other in computer science. So I had a pretty good situation going. And I became a branch chief. I was a national branch chief at NSA headquarters. Now there wasn't too many people ahead of me, and besides, the guy who recruited me into that position had been a station chief in Korea. Friends work. You make connections.
Yeah.
And we were having a good time. And guess what? My buddy from Korea rotated out, and I got him a job right next to me. So we were back together again. And we were doing some pretty interesting stuff, most of which I really, unfortunately, can't talk much about. But if you read the newspapers, you would know. Somebody had to be doing something funny, and that was us mostly, us guys like us. And that was by 88. Made it back over to England, TDY, to do some observation, see what some other people were doing, kind of thing, so we could bring some ideas back to the operations we were running and that sort of thing. It's fun to go back to England. As a side note, in the 60s, when I was in England, that was the height of the socialist movement. The Harold Wilson government, the Labour government, socialism. Once you've lived it, you'll never do it twice, I guarantee you. You have to see it to see how bad it fails. By the time I went back in 88, Maggie Thatcher had been in office, or in prime minister. A total change. People were now happy, and people were working and enjoying themselves. The difference was so, the contrast is so amazing. So but we did get to go to a couple, and my buddy had been in England as well. Like I said, we've been most of the places different times. We even went to an old fish and chip shop he liked. It was called the Cod Father.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
That's very creative.
Very, very English. You have to be dry. But anyway, we got back to headquarters after the TDY, and we instituted some change and so forth. And then I got tapped to move on to do something else. Did some more stuff. Never, only went TDY a couple more times. Went back to Korea in 1991, just for about a week or so, and to do some coordination sort of things. And then in 1995, Clinton and Gore were in office. And probably one of the, in my opinion, silliest things ever happening, the National Performance Review. The one that destroyed a lot of our government, bureaucracy's ability to do their job. And I was one of those people that had a target on their back. I was white, I was over 50, and I was a supervisor, and I was technical. These people must go. We must get rid of them. We must bring in new people from the bottom. National Policy Performance Review. So, early buyouts, 1995, that's when it began. Well, when someone walks up to you and says, I'm going to give you a big pile of money if you'll go away quietly If you're smart, you say, okay, make it worth my while, and I will. And I retired at the age of 53 with a whole pocket of money, because all those times overseas, and a lot of people don't know this, in the federal government, and we were the accepted service, not the competitive service. There's a lot of difference in that too. But you're allowed, when you're overseas, to accumulate 45 days of vacation. And that means work days. Not serial, but 5 days a week for 9 weeks. And because we were so busy in Japan and Korea and traveling so much, we had a lot of restored annual leave. So I had, at that point, I think I had about 2-3 years worth of leave backed up at 45 days a crack, or 45 days, 9 weeks a crack. Guess what? You're going to pay for all that too, because those are the rules. I didn't take it. You gave it. It's mine. You can't take it away. You got to pay me for it. Oh. Hey, somebody does that, you walk away and you smile. And that's when I started doing other things. Like, I had a woodworking business, making crafts. My wife is a fiber artist. We were selling crafts and having fun. And that market started dying around 2000. But I'd been a jazz enthusiast since teenage years in the luncheonette business. And I used to be in the shop working and listening to this local radio station, jazz station, at a university. And they'd have a little contest and they'd say, well, anybody knows this, the answer to this question, call in. I always called in. And so I'd tell them what the answer was. After about a dozen or so times, the guy on the other end said, look, you seem to know all this stuff. You ought to be here. I said, okay. He said, you want to? I said, yeah, I'll come up. And then I started doing jazz radio.
Was that as a job, or was that as a volunteer?
It was a job.
As a job?
Paid job.
Okay.
Paid job. I don't do anything for nothing.
I didn't know. You know how sometimes public radio will have volunteer stuff? So
and they do.
Okay.
But I didn't. You don't have to pay me big, but you got to pay me. Just because volunteer work's fun, but not for long. You don't have a commitment. There's a contract. So I started doing like 3 hours a week, and then it was 6 hours a week. And then it was probably about 9 or 10 hours a week at different times, days, even different genres. Older jazz, new jazz, big band, whatever. I didn't care. I did it all. Had a lot of fun. After about 5 or 6 years of that, I think I've had enough. It was fun. I mean, playing music that you like and getting paid for it is hard to say no to. So I said, okay. And so I was back in the shop. The business was dying. I kind of closed it. And the telephone rang. Hey, it's my old work buddy. A guy named Jim also, incidentally. They used to call us J Squared, or Jim and Jim. And he said, hey, you tired of doing all this nonsense? You want to go back in business? I said, okay. Doing what? He said, you know. And I was suddenly working in industry. Started with General Dynamics, because they'd bought a bunch of stuff, hardware and software, and they didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know how to market it, didn't know how to make it work even. So they paid us to make it work. And we did. And I guess they decided it wasn't quite profitable enough for them. So they dropped that, and okay, we're gone. About the same time, somebody called my friend Jim, somebody he'd known back had been in Europe with, actually. And he said, hey, got another opportunity. Want to go south? I said, okay. So we signed up with a little company in Florida that had absolutely nothing to do with what we were doing. And but it was a great cover. And we were off to places like Guatemala, Colombia, helping the indigenous folks with the drug problem.
Now, so this is very interesting. So you started in maintenance and communication, intelligence. What was and then so this business that you started, was this kind of you developed a contracting firm? Is that kind of what you
No,
and your
no,
friend did?
no. We just were hired into places.
Okay.
We never owned anything.
Okay.
They hired our expertise
Okay.
and our experiences.
So this job out of Florida that would take you to South America, what were the requirements and what made you guys think, yeah, we could totally handle this?
Well, for one thing, the director of counter narcotics at NSA kind of told the company, "This is how it's going to be. If you want some contracts, this is how it is. You got to hire these two guys, and they're going to do these things." And that's what we did.
And that didn't make you feel nervous at all?
Nah, I never feel nervous. Once you've been in crazy situations, it's just another one. But we actually developed a system along with a couple other people, something that was quite sellable in the SIGINT environment, signals intelligence environment, cost effective, priced at a price that governments in places like Colombia and Guatemala and Peru and so forth could actually afford to buy and use. And guess what? It came with training. Training by two people who had over half a century each in the business, in all aspects of the business. And they were more than willing to work and learn and buy the system. So the company in Florida made their money, more money than they paid us. And we made friends and contacts and associates in various police and in various countries, police, Army, and Coast Guard organizations. And they're still working today. They are the backbone of the serious counter-narcotic effort in those places. We also worked for a little while with DEA. Didn't work with them, actually. We were working with them in the sense of introducing them to this lower cost way of achieving some of their objectives without having to have people plowing around and making a big investment in money and risk. So we worked with DA a little bit, and it was fun. And then that was in about 2010. In 2017, I got tired. I ain't young. I'm 76 now, and it was time for a rest. So I said, "Look, I'm retiring now. There's no retirement, but I'm retiring now." That was in December of 2017, and about a year later, just about a year later, Jim, my friend, came to the same conclusion. He was just a little more hard-headed because he's older than me. I kept telling him, an 80-year-old man does not need to be doing that. And he said, you're right, especially since you have one knee replacement and you need another one. It's time to quit, man. We have to stop sometime. We've already trained enough people. So there it is. So now I'm a gentleman of leisure, doing absolutely nothing worthwhile, but enjoying it.
Yeah. How do you spend your days now?
Oh, I get up somewhere around 7:30 or so, and I go downstairs to my office, which has a very large I Love Me wall. You know what those are, right?
Mm-mm.
Oh, that's all the paraphernalia you gather over the years.
Oh.
Pictures and awards and
Plaques.
And
okay.
It's called an I Love Me wall.
Oh, that's
it's
nice.
Just papered with them. I go down there and check my email and send a couple of emails, a lot of jokes. I'm also writing a few things for myself. make a couple of telephone calls, wander in my wood shop, might play a little bit there, or in the garden, or do something in the house, or once every now and then we might go somewhere. My wife was also in the business. She was with DIA when we got back from Korea. Yeah, from Korea in '87. Just after that, she went with DIA, and they just wouldn't let her travel.
What's the reason?
Because she was working counter narc also, and
Because she was, I'm sorry.
she was working counter narcotics also,
Oh, okay.
and they just couldn't conceive of the idea of a grandmotherly looking woman getting kidnapped or killed in South America someplace. I mean, that's really the reality of it. You can explain a guy, but it's really hard to explain Granny, or falling out of a helicopter or something like that. It's not something you want to do. So she didn't travel, and but she did. She worked Desert One, which was good. But after I retired and we'd bummed around enough, she said, this isn't fun. I'm retiring too. And so we did. So we're now people of pleasure.
So does she enjoy the same hobbies you enjoy?
No, she has her own. She still has her fiber arts, spinning, weaving, doll making, bear making, knitting, crocheting, that kind of stuff. She's quite a researcher, did a lot of genealogy work. You're a wizard at that, actually. I couldn't do that kind of in-depth research.
It's a good skill.
Yeah. Oh, great. I can ask her a question. She comes back 3 days later with an answer and documentation to prove it. And we just kind of pal around a little bit. It's been 54 years. We're actually pretty good at it. Stay out of each other's way.
Where do you live now then?
We're in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
It's a little development. The house is getting to be too big for us. And that always happens. But we're happy there, more or less. And there it is.
So you had mentioned prior to the recording starting that you know 8 languages.
Well, I wouldn't say I know them. I can function in them.
That's knowing them to me. So would you like to list those 8 languages?
Well, let's see. I was school trained or university trained in Russian. I learned Korean, a little bit of training, but in country, but mostly by being immersed. Same way with Japanese. If you want to order something in a restaurant, you kind of better know how to order it, how to ask for it. The Spanish came with my work down in South America. I did try and take a course in it at the local university in Maryland, but they kept changing instructors. And if you know anything about Spanish, dialectually, it's so different. There must be 80 different dialects. It's kind of difficult. So I said, well, I'll just learn from the people I'm with, because I'll learn their dialect. So I did that. Tagalog came about, that's the Philippines. That came about from having gone there a few times. And once again, if you're in the country, at least learn some of the basics. If you can't order a meal, order a beer, or order a taxi cab and tell them where to go, you're not very useful. You must be American. Or as the Brits used to say, everybody speaks English if you speak loudly and slowly. It's not right. It's just not in my nature. If I'm in a country, I'm going to learn some language and we're going to use it. And I don't care if I make mistakes grammatically. There's only 2 places in the world that matters. France, and I do speak a little French, and Japan. But in both cases, you can't possibly speak the language because you weren't born here. That's their attitude. And that's reality.
So would they rather you speak in English in those 2 places?
No, they'd rather fracture you with broken English. A quick vignette in that subject. In Japan, where we lived in a little housing area versus where my office was, there was a road, exactly one car length or car width wide. I mean, you could shoplift out of either side of the car, greengrocers and so forth. And our kind of used, very, very used car, because you weren't allowed to have a new car, you couldn't import cars, and you weren't going to buy a Japanese brand new car in country. Why, for a couple of years. We drove junkers. Well, it broke down right in front of the greengrocers that we had shopped at. And my wife spoke fluent Japanese because she'd studied it, had tutors and so forth. Actually, tutors, that's being generous. There were two other women, professional women, Japanese women, and these girls used to go on out and have fun. They'd go places and just enjoy each other's company and learning Japanese at the same time, and in English in exchange, because it's best to trade language rather than sell it. Anyway, so she spoke very good Japanese. My wife did. Car's broken down. She goes in. She asked in Japanese if she might use the telephone. Her car was broken down. Needed to call her husband. Oh, by all means. So she dialed my number at the office, and of course it was busy. Always busy. And she had put the phone down without speaking. And the next thing you know, the woman in the shop said, was there a problem? And without thinking, my wife translated mentally, directly, busy to busy in Japanese. Well, I'm sorry, phones are an inanimate object. They can't possibly use a transitive verb. Therefore, you do not speak Japanese. And it's that dead straight on. So this woman, the shop woman, ran down the street to find the local linguist who spoke a wonderful brand of Japlish, which is 18 words in Japanese and 2 English. And you get brutalized by this broken language. And that happens in 2 places, in France and in Japan.
That is interesting.
Yeah. Let's see, I don't know where I was in the list. Spanish, Tagalog, Russian, Polish. Polish and Russian are so close together, it's ridiculous. Same with Ukrainian. In fact, it's confusing with all this Ukraine thing that's been locally going on now. I get about every 5th word when the people are speaking and the translation's coming on. This doesn't line up very well. Anyway, it's a bunch of languages. And it just mostly reflects things I've done or things I've been, places I've been. Because I do believe language is basic. And then there's dialect in English. We lived in Yorkshire, England. Broad Yorkshire is a dialect, and I could speak in Broad Yorkshire right now, and you would not have a clue what I was saying, but it would still be English. The same thing with Geordie, which is the dialect of the Newcastle area, and Andy Capp, which is Cockney. The character Andy Capp in that's Cockney. Again, you wouldn't understand most of it. Out an evening, you'd be in the pub. You know what a pub is, eh? You know what a pub is? Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
On a winter's night, you come in and there's a roaring fire, and you walk in, the first thing you're likely to hear, hey, put wood in the hole. I'll slow it down. Put wood in the hole.
Oh,
it means close the door.
All right.
That's dialect. That's pure dialect. So it's just stuff you accumulate over time. Since 55 years in the business.
Well, it definitely does take skill or a natural ability to pick up languages more easily. It sounds like you and your wife both are gifted with language.
Or had been exposed to it. In her case, she grew up in a house where one grandmother spoke French and the other spoke German. So
in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, that was in on the main line. Actually various places in Pennsylvania, because the grandmothers were different places. But yeah, they all spoke their original languages.
That's great.
Yeah. I didn't have that luxury, but I fell into it. And I just like to listen. I like people.
So do you guys have any vacations planned in the near future?
No, we've traveled.
Okay.
There's no need to travel if you've been there already. Although the things I do regret are I've flown over the Grand Canyon at 37,000 feet so many times I've never stood near it. Maybe someday.
So maybe time to start seeing America
maybe
since
a
you
little
saw
bit,
the rest
but
of the world.
you're back to traveling again. And
Yeah.
airplane travel is no longer fun. It used to be.
Yeah.
Driving is kind of boring. Trains are impossible. So, and cruises, no. I wouldn't mind doing a riverboat cruise someday, maybe. But do I need to? Probably not. I can go into my office and look at my pictures, or, we've been there, been so many places, but it's been fun.
Yeah. What a fortunate experience.
Yeah. Even a blind squirrel sometimes gets an acorn.
So you didn't mention, did you have children?
Bad subject.
Okay. Sorry.
Adopted, Vietnamese, now estranged. Doesn't work.
Yeah.
Doesn't always work.
Doesn't always. I understand that personally.
Well, at 6 and 9, standards and mores are already set. You're not going to change them.
And early childhood trauma.
Yeah. So.
Yes. Well, that was wonderful that there was the attempt and an experience in that as well. So, okay. So I had some questions because you have had such an interesting life. Let me try to recall the questions I had along the way. Okay, we'll do this. In your military career, can you think of a particular person that had a strong impact on you?
Oh, my goodness. I would have to say my first commanding officer at the 226, Francis X. Toomey, now deceased, unfortunately. But his style was fascinating. He never ordered anything. He suggested it. And somehow you always felt obliged to do it. There was never a question. He was in charge, but he never pushed that point. It gave me, I think, a touchstone for how I liked to manage people. And I've managed a lot of people over the years. That carrot works so much better. This stick hurts, and besides, you could hurt yourself. You hurt your wrist. So use the carrot.
Respect can go a long ways, can't it?
It's two-way, very two-way. You earn it.
Yeah.
And also, well, you want some management philosophy?
Sure.
Somebody once asked me, at headquarters, I had like 15 people or something working for me, all professionals. And one of them asked me, well, what do you do? You just, you're here. We're all doing these other things. What are you doing? I said, well, I have 4 jobs. So my first job is to arbitrate priorities. Nobody should have 2 number 1 priorities. I have to set the priorities. That's my job. My second job is resources. Time, money, people, space, things. You have to have those things. It's my job to get them for you. Fight for them, I have to. I said, the third is if you actually manage to screw up and do something really wonderful, it's my job to make sure you're rewarded for it. So my fourth job is when you screw it up really bad, is to stand up and take every one of the arrows. That is my job. I think more people did that, they'd be happier.
Yeah.
Know who you are. Know where you fit. And I think that came from Toomey.
That's
fascinating
wonderful.
Guy. My first commanding officer. Talk about influencing for a long time.
Do you feel like his influence contributed to your early experiences with leadership?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he threw me in the briar patch. Good way. Figure your way out. Or lay there and cry and get hurt. Yeah. You have to challenge people. It's terribly important. If you want to be the number one, everything, know everything, you're going to fail. Because nobody's that good.
That's good. Yeah. Okay, let me see here. So, can you think of a memory that you're allowed to talk about?
Yeah, that's sometimes a problem.
Yeah. That was your most memorable moment working for the NSA.
Oh, goodness gracious. There have been a lot of them. Been so many. I don't think I could isolate one. Accomplishments. There was, it's just too much. It's too much. No one jumps out. It was
just all of it.
Yeah. There were a couple I was very, very proud of. Again, I can't talk about. But no, I'm sorry. I can't really give you a definitive answer on that.
Okay. Do you have a favorite cuisine from all of your travel?
Korean. It's what I ate for lunch today. It's what I'm going to have for dinner, too.
Now, since you've actually lived in Korea numerous times, do you feel you cook your Korean at home, the food, you can prepare it for yourself better than the Americanized version at restaurants?
I don't go to Americanized Korean restaurants.
Okay.
I only go to good ethnic restaurants, ones that actually have the food.
Okay.
Like after lunch today, which was a lovely, very, very spicy hot soup. It was so good. I went up as we were paying our checks. I saw the Korean woman in the back that had been cooking, and I called to her in Korean. I said, "Hey, mother, that was a fabulous yuki-chan, the soup." And she beamed.
Oh, I bet she loved that.
Oh, yeah. Because I did it in Korean.
Yes.
And that's, it's just the way it is. Actually, a vignette from Chambersburg, there's a Korean restaurant there. And I'd like to go down there. The food is quite good. The folks that have it now apparently bought it from the previous owners who had terrible food. But now it's very, very good under their management, under their ownership. But they kept the old menus. And they're in a terrible translation of English into English. I have no idea what they're trying to say. So I have to order in Korean, and then she can translate it to the cook.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Maybe you should translate their menus for them.
Well, she's perfectly capable of doing it, but the clientele that they get, there aren't a whole lot of Korean speakers in Hamburg. I'll guarantee you there aren't. So, no, it's just one of those humorous things. I go in and I'll ask for something and order something, and she said, "Well, I can't do that because I can't get the proper things to do that with." That sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah. But Korean is my all-time favorite cuisine. Although so many others.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. I gotta switch to my back page here. So we've covered so much stuff today. What advice would you give to future generations?
In what respect? Excuse me.
If there are some folks in the future watching this video clip who are youthful, like maybe just beginning their adult years, what kind of advice do you think that you've gathered?
Think for yourself. Teachers are there to present information. Not all of it is either right or wrong. It is merely one reflection of information. Use your eyes and your ears. You were created with 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. Keep things in proportion. Watch and listen and shut up. Absorb information. Sort it out later. Take that which applies to what you're trying to do and you can live with. And do that. But be yourself. No models. There are no models. We're unique individuals. Be an individual. Or be a lemming. There's another choice. There are a lot of lemmings out there. And they run right off the cliff. That's my advice.
That's good. That's good. Is there anything else that you'd like to share that we haven't covered?
At this point, I can't think of too much. It's been fun. And I hope it's been useful.
Thank you so much for your time today. This was really great. You have such a unique experience. Your life is.
I know a whole lot of people just like me.
We just got to get them all on camera.
Yeah, you'll never get them all on camera. This guy Jim that I mentioned earlier, my old workmate, he started in ASA in 1958 in Ethiopia.
Oh, interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean there are a lot of people like that.
Yeah.
And they were in the Air Force, whatever we're calling the cryptologic unit today, in the Navy, in the Army, and elsewhere, who are like me. There's a lot of us out there. They just don't see us.
Yeah.
And you're not supposed to.
I suppose that's the trick of it, right? We're not supposed to see you. But as many as we can film, then those of us who don't even know these things are going on, it's very interesting for us to get to.
I'm sure it is. One little vignette about my wife. I had a great pleasure. You asked if something really stood out in my mind. It does. It's come to me again. I told you after we came back from Korea that she went to work for DIA. She had never been in the business before that. And as part of their training, they had to go to various members of the intelligence community to be briefed. And her group came to NSA, and guess who got to brief them?
Oh.
So after dragging yourself around the world all this time, this is what we were actually doing. But she already, basically understood. But, it was neat to be able to brief her.
Yeah, that's special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, that concludes our interview with James Wandell. Thank you for your time and for your military service.
Okay, my pleasure. Don't forget the federal service.